welcome to our 49th episode of In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. My name is George Glass, and I'm an Associate Managing Director in the Cyber Threat Intelligence team. I'm in the MC seat today while Keith is at RSA. Joining me this week from the CTI team are Dave Truman, Ryan Hicks, and Sarah Becker. Today is May 7th, and we are going to be covering the most recent trends that our intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. So let's start with news you can use for May 7th. Following increased exploitation, Palo Alto has updated recommendations to customers impacted by CVE 2024-3400. The company is recommending that customers upgrade to a fixed version of PanOS, such as PanOS 10.29H1, 11.04H1, 11.12H3, and all later PanOS versions, as this will fully protect their devices. Palo has also released additional hotfixes and other deployed maintenance releases. It's recommended that affected organizations continue to track updates made to Palo Alto's advisory feature updates. They are updating that page almost daily at the moment. So for the latest news, certainly go and check out that URL there. Our second news you can use story is kind of an interesting one. The Zero Day Initiative reported a new zero-day vulnerability affecting Ivanti with a CVSS score of 9.8, making it critical. However, no other details are available at this time. Even the specific Ivanti software that the vulnerability affects is not listed in the ZDI posting. However, Ivanti on their forums released the following statement. This reported vulnerability does not impact Ivanti Connect Secure, Policy Secure, or on neurons for ZTA solutions. It does not affect customers running any SaaS solution from Ivanti. It has been reported that an on-prem solution that normally does not face the internet and has not been substantiated by our security and engineering team at this time. They go on to say that they're working with the individual that reported the vulnerability, but are unable to validate the claims at this time. Of course, here at Kroll, we'll continue to monitor for any further underground activity surrounding that advisory, and we'll be sure to let you know if there's anything substantial that comes from it. Remember, if you have any questions about this or any other questions, please contact Kroll using cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. So let's get into today's briefing. Today, we're covering the following trends that our team is concentrating on this week. I'm going to talk through some overlaps with Sophos reporting that we've been investigating. Dave is going to inform us about more malicious job interviews that threat actors are using to deliver malware. Ryan will be putting the spotlight on PLUGX malware, and of course, we'll get a ransomware roundup from Sarah. So let's take a look at those modified binaries that Sophos reported on last week. Sophos released a report detailing how versions of their binaries and other security tools had been modified in order to deploy malicious payloads such as Cobalt Strike, Brute Ratel, Ice Nova, also known as Lactrodectrus, and Quackbot. In some cases, fake installers were used to deploy malware, although other binaries, including DLLs, have been part of more complex attack chains. The malware campaign injected malicious code into sections of the DLL executables, replacing the original content with malware payloads. That means that the threat actors are editing the resource section of the DLL and other payloads. And in some samples, they inserted malicious code that constructs a key on the stack, which is then used to decode other elements of the encrypted payload. So quite a complex attack chain there. Once encrypted, it executes those other malicious payloads directly in memory, which is designed to bypass disk-based detection mechanisms. You can see some of the example files that were listed in the Sophos report there: healthapi.dll, Sophos fstelemetry.exe, and Sophos fs.exe. Editing the files in that way does break code signing certificates. So there's a good detection methodology there for unsigned versions of those executables, and that really does make those portable executables or those DLLs easy to identify, not only on an affected system, but out in open source. And so the core CTI team, we analyzed a lot of the files given in that Sophos report, and we found that the operators of these campaigns also left other quite easily identifiable clues that it's a non-standard library, such as compilation times that are far into the future. It's pretty easy to spot when something's compiled in 2060 that something may not be quite right there. Details of all of that is listed in our report. But interestingly, we identified that the reporting from Sophos overlaps with the ICE Nova campaign and the PikaBot campaigns we covered in our March 18th briefing. And those use WebDAV calls to collect malicious MSI installers and executables. And the reporting that Sophos released actually included some of those files that we reported on March 18th. So you can see on the right there is an example JavaScript payload used to install ICE Nova. A little bit of a sneak peek, because this is something that we're going to be releasing a blog post on fairly soon. Note that the WebDAV used to collect that edited CallSoft installer, the IPs belong to a ASN called Stark Industries, which we often see related to such malware campaigns. So yeah, there's a very interesting overlap there. So yeah, now we understand that these malicious installers were also being investigated by Sophos. These ICE Nova campaigns that we saw threat actors using, we also saw vulnerable NVIDIA drivers to perform DLL sideloading as well. So it's a very complex group of campaigns here. Now, the tactics that we're talking about here may, on the surface, seem pretty sophisticated and a good way of bypassing detection methods, but that's really not the case so much. As we've already discussed, there's many factors of this that do make it stick out as potentially suspicious or malicious behavior, and the tradecraft to make these installers actually contains quite a few errors, and it's likely that a lot of the campaigns were put together fairly quickly and in a manual fashion, which is why we saw so much overlap with the same portable executables and DLLs. So yeah, lots of quick iterations, but all part of the same campaign. So the thinking that we have here is that the technique is probably used for some sort of social engineering for end users, especially if you recognize the brand names of organizations that are associated with security, but also may be used to hinder SOC operations, because at a glance, that chain of activity stemming from on the surface a legitimate binary may go unnoticed. But the overlap that we saw in these campaigns, we've seen operated by KTA 130, which is Exotic Lily, and closely associated with KTA 088 Wizard Spider. And although those campaigns by those groups are probably not comprehensive for all of the things that we're seeing here, there is certainly a lot of overlap here, and certainly a trend that a lot of threat groups are using to deliver malware to endpoints. We have updated some of our detection capability for this campaign. We're very confident in our ability to detect and then respond to incidents that involve these TTPs that we've mentioned today. So next up, Dave is going to take us through a social engineering campaign used to deliver malware with fake job interviews. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you. Security researchers at SecureNix detailed a recent campaign targeting developers with a fake interview process designed to trick them into installing a remote access Trojan. The actor impersonates an interviewer, supplying the victim with a zip archive containing a GitHub repository of a Node.js npm package. When the actor convinces the victim to use the code, it runs a malicious code segment hidden in one of the 20 JavaScript files. The code is further hidden within the file by combining it into a single line and appending a large number of space characters. This would require horizontally scrolling a text editor to see the code unless word wrap is enabled. The code is further obfuscated with modified base64 routine. The write-up from SecureNix states that the purpose of the script was simply to download the next stage. However, Qualls CTI deobfuscated and analyzed the script and found the code related to information stealing, specifically from browser and cryptocurrency information. The disparity in the findings might explain if the original researchers only performed limited dynamic analysis of the script rather than combining it with static analysis. The script then downloads and extracts a Python script, which in turn downloads and executes a remote access Trojan, which is also written in Python. This appears to be a sophisticated social engineering attack using the trust associated with popular open source hubs and common job interview procedures to infect the victim's machine. It is recommended to educate users to this kind of advanced social engineering, as it may not be covered in standard anti-phishing training. Thank you, George.
Thank you very much, Dave. Ryan, let's get the spotlight on PLUGX. Over to you, mate.
Thanks, George. So looking at PLUGX this week. So PLUGX first appeared quite a while ago in 2008, has continued to evolve its techniques since, and has since been attributed to several threat actors, including KTA 038, 039, and 108, with the aliases on the screen there. And once on a victim device, the objective of PLUGX is to maintain a foothold as a backdoor or remote access Trojan, providing remote capabilities to the threat actor, including device rebooting, keylogging, gathering system information, and deploying further tools. Looking at initial access, typically this is through phishing and more recently removal media distribution as well. For the phishing sides in 2023, the campaign SmugX, which was attributed to KTA 108 or Mustang Panda, and that targeted government entities in Europe through a technique called HTML smuggling. And that technique is where threat actors embed malicious content inside seemingly benign HTML files, which can potentially evade network-based detection. And then shown there is the few of the attack chains for the initial delivery in that SmugX campaign. And also in the past few years, I mentioned something we've also observed recently is PLUGX spreading between devices through USB in a worm-like infection. And during execution, during our recent observations of USB delivery, the USB itself contains the executable there, CEF helper, which tries to load a malicious DLL, which is the WSC DLL. CEF helper is in fact a renamed legitimate Avast executable that is susceptible to DLL sideloading, and those two are not just sort of unique to our cases. That those are kind of replicated among a lot of open source reporting as well. The thematic of DLL sideloading is also was seen during the previous campaign I mentioned, SmugX, where the legitimate RoboForm application was also used to sideload a malicious DLL. So it continues to be a sideloading DLLs continues to be a favorable TTP of PLUGX and associated threat actors. Move on to the next slide, please. So looking at persistence, in both delivery methods, persistence was achieved through adding the legitimate program and the malicious DLL to the run registry key. And our observations during the USB delivery have shown that the DLL replicated itself onto internal drive, C drive, and created the Avast folder you see there in the second bullet point, and before adding the DLL to the same registry key. The main component with command and control, looking at PLUGX, is it was been observed adding a firewall rule to which was designated as Microsoft Edge to sort of disguise itself. And that firewall rule was configured to permit incoming traffic for a specific TCP port, and that just enables PLUGX to communicate with the C2 server on the desired channel it wanted to for sort of exfiltration, execution of commands, and that additional toolset deployment. And lastly here, for defense evasion, just one thing that kind of stood out really for PLUGX is that it contained a method of self-deletion through a single command. So in case sort of an emergency button to sort of self-delete for a threat actor. Once receiving the commands, PLUGX essentially just removes all relevant files that it brought in and created, and also removes the any registry keys it created for that persistence I mentioned previously. So at the bottom, I've just put a few kind of detection opportunities listed here. The ones that I highlighted are really the more recent DTPs that we observed. So any kind of processes, the CF helper or the WSC.dll, particularly running from that external drive recycler bin, which has been seen quite a number of cases, both internally and open source. Also, registry run keys being created, particularly referencing those two files again, and also that directory being created is a potentially interesting alert to kind of investigate further. And one of the key mitigations again for this kind of USB delivery is to limit the use of removal media on corporate devices, and if they are required, disabling autoplay. And this mitigates not only PLUGX but other malware families that we continue to see use USB delivery, such as Raspberry Robin, which we've mentioned in previous weeklies and blogs before. And with that, I'll hand back to George.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Really, really interesting stuff. Thank you. And last, but by no means least, Sarah, there's been lots of news about Change Healthcare this week. Please get us up to date.
Yeah, of course, George. So as we've already known in previous ransomware roundups, just talking about the ransomware group Black Hat was behind this attack, but more news has come out just about how they went about the attack. So United Health CEO Andrew Whitty, he confirmed in a written testimony that Change Healthcare's network was hacked, obviously by Black Hat, as we've mentioned previously, and the group utilized stolen credentials to log into the company's Citrix remote access service. So this service also did not have multi-factor authentication. That's kind of always a recommended practice, just to have that extra level of security. So again, there was no worry about bypassing it since it was not in place. Andrew Whitty stated that the threat actors began encrypting the organization's systems on February 21st. But he also revealed that he believes the threat actors were in the system probably 10 days prior. They had access into it, and while they were in the network, they stole patient and corporate data, as we've known, and that they would use that against the healthcare organization for their extortion purposes. Investigations are still ongoing, but they did identify that the threat actors gained access into the portal. They're thinking February 12th using that stolen employee's credentials. So there was a bleeping computer article, for just the information behind this attack, and they stated that Whitty further outlined their immediate actions to secure the systems following the attack, characterizing them as swift and forceful, noting that the threat was successfully contained by taking everything down despite knowing the impact this would have on people. Following the attack, the organization's IT team replaced thousands of laptops, rotated credentials, and completely rebuilt Change Healthcare's data center network and core services in just a few weeks. So again, Andrew Whitty was stating that they had a very swift operation of how they had action items after this attack, but he also stated that a task that they completed would have taken several months, and the company was able to have done that in just a few weeks. That is all for me, George. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to our presenters, Dave and Ryan, as well. Thank you all very much for tuning in to this weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. Remember, if you have any questions, please do get in touch with us using cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. Thank you, everybody.